This week we had a Rico 12 first. Brendan T., who was our guest speaker, spoke to us while driving on the road there in Ireland. So there's some background noise, there's some road noise. Please don't get distracted by that, but it was quite the sight and the talent that he exhibited while driving a stick shift on the roads of Ireland and giving this powerful message all at the same time. Here we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict and the host of the Rico 12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm living the relative happy, joyous, and free life that is promised to those living in recovery, and have been very active in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013. Welcome to the 120th meeting of Rico 12. Rico 12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds and the similarities of recovery from all afflictions and addictions, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are trudging this road. We are an open meeting for all, no matter your life experiences, faith traditions, nationality, or background. To learn more about Rico 12, please go to www.rico12.com. That's RECO12.com, and find out more there. Rico 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. I'll put the information and links in the chat of the live meeting and in the show notes of the podcast if you wish to contribute to this cause. If Rico 12 is a meaningful tool for you in your recovery walk, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast in the podcast platform of your choosing. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected by our speakers, and that light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. I'm excited to hear from this week's guest, Brendan T. I've listened to recordings of him speaking in various meetings and conferences, and I'm grateful that he was available to join us this week. Now, here's a little bit about Brendan, and then we'll turn the floor over to him. Brendan T. is sober since the 28th of June, 2008. He is an SA Nomad. Brendan joined the fellowship in Japan, got sober in Ireland, and currently will be speaking to us from Ireland. He loves a laugh and sharing recovery. Brendan does service at all levels. Take it away, Brendan. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan. I'm a sexaholic, and it's good to be here with you. And you'll have to forgive me. I hope you're going to be able to hear me okay. I'm actually driving at the moment. If it gets difficult, let me know and I'll stop and pull over. But yeah, and I was thinking, doing this driving, I was thinking that reminds me of Radio Luxembourg. You know, when I was 12 years old, they used to have these pirate radio stations, and you know, they'd play them off ships off the coast. You know, sort of, and the authorities would try to stop them. And you know, I think we're a little bit like that. We're a little bit like sort of pirate radio stations, or the, you know, as somebody sort of said, with the what do you call it? Where they counter-revolutionaries in a way. You know, we've been out there, we did it all. You know, I come from the hippie era, you know, so I was out there, you know, peace and love, and, you know, and it's all sort of thing, and it's all great. And I did that. And now I live a way of life which is, you know, almost diametrically opposite to that whole thing of it's all free love and all this sort of thing. But interestingly, love, all that's changed in my outlook is in relation to the physical aspect, in terms of the physical and the mental, with regards to my notion of what was love and what was relationships and everything. That's what's changed. I now have a completely different idea on it. And I've found over the years of sobriety, and I'm not married, which means that I have been chased for a lot longer than I intended. You know, I didn't intend to be celibate, you know, for more than 14 years. But that's what's happened. But what I found is that, you know, it's just, sex is optional. I thought it was the be-all and end-all of everything. As a matter of fact, it was just so necessary because it gave me what I needed. It had an effect on me that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the effect, but what I enjoyed was it changed my way of thinking, or it changed how I felt. You know? And in the doctor's opinion in AA, which by the way, the AA Big Book is actually our basic text. The White Book is something that is supportive of that. But the very basic text on how we do the program of recovery is in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in there, in the doctor's opinion, it says to us that men and women, basically, in our putting it into the terms of our program, act out because we like the effect. We like the effect of what lust does for us. You know, we like what it does is it changes my brain chemistry. Other people, you know, it has a particular impact on the large proportion of the human race. You know, they have a bit of lust and then they have a bit of sex and then they get on with their lives. Not me. You know what I mean? I let a bit in and it is my life. It is all my life. And everything else is secondary to it. I become like the rat in the experiment in the maze. I keep running down to the end of the maze and tapping the button where I get my keys of whatever it is that I get as my reward. And what's interesting is they did a test with rats in relation to the use of a particular drug, and I don't know which it was, but it was a pretty strong drug. And they found that, you know, when they stopped the drug altogether, the rats just actually lay down and died. When they couldn't get their drug, life was not worth living. They didn't eat, they didn't do anything, just lay down and they died. You know? And I suppose at a certain, you know, when I started and I first started to have relations, that was the be all and end all of everything. I mean, it was like, you know, there's that book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, and in the book, he describes the acting out between this lady and her garden or whatever, and he talks about it in terms of this golden sort of sensation and feeling, and I could totally go with that. I mean, I could just feel that it was something so pure and so beautiful and so loving, whatever, you know, that's what it started off as. And then it just became something which was, it was the drug. It had nothing to do with the other person. It had nothing to do with anything except the final getting that hit, yeah? And part of the hunt and everything was part of the whole process. It just became an all-consuming part of my life, you know? And I was asked for a title, and I think I gave the title I gave was Just Let Go. How do you let go of something which is so necessary just to be able to breathe, to live, to give any kind of meaning to your life? Because at the end, in my acting out, the only thing that gave meaning to my life was the very short period or moments and sensation of ecstasy, which came at the end of acting out. And that, and all the mental build up to it, you know, all the crazy mental fantasy building up to it, was what consumed my mind and enabled me to block out my reality. And my reality was that, you know, I was addicted to alcohol, to substances. I was, you know, my life was in chaos. And when I managed to get into programs for both of those addictions, I didn't realize that this other addiction was there in the background and had actually been the primary driver of my addictions. But there it was. And now this was the only thing that I had left. I mean, you know, the alcohol was gone, the substances were gone, you know, and I needed something to change my brain chemistry, and acting out would do that, and lust would do it, and it would allow me to put aside in some form or fashion. But basically, you know, it's in the big book. He talks about, you know, we're like the farmer who comes up from the basement after the tornado has torn down the house, and he comes up and there's nothing left. It's all gone. He's there with the wife and he says, oh man, ain't it good? The wind stopped. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and that's me. Like I'm there, and the house is burnt down, and the police are sort of at the door, and I've got no money, and I'm just sort of this thing. But if I'm acting out, if I'm lost in the fantasy and I'm sort of this thing and everything, I'm not on the planet. I'm just not thinking about this thing at all. And and that's what it was. I mean, you could say what I was doing is, my motto was, just let go of reality. Just let go of reality and take off down the road there. Get some of this into you, and you'd forget about everything else. Forget about it all. Yeah. But then, of course, just after that moment, just after the moment when you've been to and been out of the fantasy and you're back and it's acted out, and now you're back in reality, it's just suddenly comes screaming into you. This acting out has not taken away all the mess of the life that's there. And as I sit there looking at that, the horror of it and the self-recrimination and that whole sort of thing, what can I do? The only thing that's left to do is to head back in again and try to get something again to change how I feel. And that's what my life became. A spiral, a junkie who could not live without this, because the detox into reality was too painful. And I came into the program. I had been in Alcoholics Anonymous by this stage about 8 years sober. I had been around the program for about 3 years, but I had periods of, let's say, sexual abstinence, but with others. But I wasn't sober. And I came back to Ireland, and in my own small town, there was 3 meetings a week. And I started going to 3 meetings a week. I was already going to, a meeting almost every night for years in some recovery program. But 1 meeting of SA a week was not doing it for me. It just wasn't enough. So I started doing 3 meetings a week, and I got a sponsor who, much to my surprise, didn't seem to care about my feelings in terms of, what will I say? He wasn't interested in the noise that was going on around me. He wasn't interested in the fact that I was living in a very warm country and the women were going around scantily dressed. As he would say, keep that for your therapist. It had nothing to do with my sobriety. And I'm thinking, but you're like, there's all this temptation. And of course, I had to learn an invitation back into, my addiction. That's all it is. It's just, I can find temptation anywhere, because my mind, my whole system wants the drug. So what I had to learn was to turn away from the temptation, not to indulge. I don't know how many times I've heard people saying to me, as they come into the program, well, I just want to be normal. I want to be able to walk around, look around like everybody else. And I think, well, there was a fellow who suggested that to me one time. He suggested that he had achieved that. And he said he was in a Latin American country. And he said to me, Brendan, now he wasn't in this program, he was in the AA program. He said, Brendan, I've changed. You see, I've realized that the problem is the difference between mirar, to look, and admirar, to admire. So he said, I've stopped looking. I now just admire. And I said, oh, well, that's a brilliant idea. Brilliant. I'll do that. Well, about 30 seconds into my admiring, I realized this wasn't going to work for me because I don't admire. What I admire immediately becomes the focus of my lust. And what's interesting is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells us when it's telling us about step 3, it says that our problem is not lust. Page 62 in the English version, top of the page, it says selfishness, self-centeredness. That's the root of my problem. And then it tells me, it explains what it means by selfishness, or some terms this. It says selfishness manifests itself in fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. I didn't realize that fear was selfish. Huh? And I never really thought about self-delusion. I just thought about I'm right. You know? I didn't have to look at all the facts. I knew I was right. Yeah? And then what's interesting there is just in there it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of our problem. And then it says driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So it's telling me that I'm not running my life at all. Now here I am thinking that I have been the bon vivant, you know, like the guy, well, man, you know, like I'm just a free spirit, you know, I'm just out there, and all those people who are tied up with their religious restrictions and this, that, and the other about why you can't do this, that, and the other. Really and truly, the problem is they've set out so many constrictions, and that's what makes us feel guilty about it. We should just get on and not be feeling this, and we wouldn't have a problem. And the reality is, I'm not even, it may not even be sex. My addiction that I think is actually my manifestation of a very high testosterone is just something which manifests to deal with the fact that I'm driven by fear and self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And I need something to take away the sensations which are coming from that, the negative sensations or whatever. And I get it through validation from sex, acting out. That's it. Like, I get it from the validation of being with a partner and that person being like sort of, you know, like sort of, I am now the great lover. I'm now the great sort of this and whatever. You know, this person wants me. I'm lusted after. That's my goal. My goal is to be lusted after, because I've got to a stage where I don't understand love, because I've had relationships and I've been in love and I felt really close to somebody and I felt dependent upon them, and the relationship has crashed. And I get to the stage where I'm starting to think I can't trust love at all. All I can trust is lust and acting out to give me what I need, because the relationships keep crashing. And so I have now become like sort of, I'm driven by forces beyond my control to have to keep going after this same fruitless quest to find that ultimate acting out experience that would bring me to eternal peace and happiness. Because that's what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for, and I don't care, you know, what I have to do in acting out to get to that sort of thing, but what I'm looking for is that final, you know, that union, that something that makes me feel complete, because I feel incomplete. Anyway, you know, how do you deal with that? I'm a prisoner. You know, it's really interesting. The just after that section that I was talking about in the big book, the next paragraph down says, our problems are primarily of our own making. It says, and I put it in the I form, I am a severe case of self-will run riot, even though I don't think so. And then it says something extremely important that I think we overlooked it on. It says, above all. So this may actually be the most important thing in the program. It says, above all, I must be rid of this selfishness or it'll kill me. So now, the reason why I'm going to work this program is not so that I'll be some saintly guy. That was not my intention. And I definitely didn't want to be a nice person, you know. I had a sense of, you know, that would have no personality or something, you know. And what I'm doing here is I'm doing this program to save my life. It tells me if I don't get free of my selfishness. It doesn't say, you know, I have to get free of lust. It says I have to get rid of selfishness. But if I get rid of my selfishness, I will also have to understand that lust is a door to my selfishness. I go through lust and it lets the selfishness pour in. Because when I'm in lust, I'm not thinking about the other person. I'm not thinking about anybody. I'm thinking about what I'm going to get out of this. How is this going to make me feel complete? So to get out of selfishness, I have to get to a stage where I am actually okay with being who I am. And that's the trick. I mean, that's, I think, the holy grail, if I might say, of recovery. And I think the door to that, I think the key to that, is this thing that Bill W. talked about, emotional sobriety. And Bill W., when he was 20 years sober, started to go into depression again. And he's going into depression, and he's really confused about it. He goes to, I believe he went to his friend, Father Ed Daly, and he says, what's going on? You know, I'm going to the meetings, and I'm putting out the chairs, and I'm cleaning the ashtrays and whatever, but I'm going into depression. And Bill suffered from terrible depressions. And Father Dowling said to him, you know, Bill, you're too dependent on AA to give you your sense of self. You've got to rely on God for that. Bill sort of had to go back and look at it. He says that he started to realize that he had almost complete dependencies on people and the circumstances of his life to give him his sense of self-worth. So here's Bill, and he's 20 years sober, and you know, I mean, he started AA and his big convention, and he's got football stadiums full of here's Bill, you know. But he's going down to his local home group now. And, you know, like the other guys, there's fellas there with 15 years sobriety and 17 years. Gee, oh, Bill, how are you doing? So this thing. And then there's people going over and they're asking other people to be their sponsor. And he's going into some meetings and people are saying, are you new? You know, and so Bill isn't getting that kind of attention and applause that Bill so badly needs to feel complete. And so he started to go into depression. And he realized this. And he said that he realized that he was going to have to root out these almost complete dependencies and the associated demands. Is that 20 minutes? Okay, I'm just going to go for another 5. And the associated demands. And he said, you know, you see, we have to be able to distinguish between a request and a demand. Now, I was looking at this, and I was thinking, I was listening to Bill. I was in a lot of pain because my relationship had broken up, and I was trying to bring it back, but it wasn't happening. And my sponsor was saying, you know, stay committed. And I was saying, to what? And he's saying, stay committed, you know. I'm saying, yes, but it's so painful. And he says, well, she's doing her job perfectly. And I said, he's insane. And he said to me, she's going to teach you unconditional love. And I thought, that's way too painful. I mean, I can't see that I'd be able to live with that. You know, I mean, what happens if, you know, I'm always being criticized, or, you know, if they're not telling me what a great person I am, because I'm dependent upon somebody to tell me I'm great for me to feel okay. So what would I be doing if I'm in a situation with people who aren't telling me I'm great? I'm in too much pain. He said, stay committed. It was really, really painful. So I was listening to a lot of speaker tapes for years. I actually went through, you know, a library of tapes, and I listened to them in alphabetical order. It was a thing called The Lights Are On there, and I listened to them for over 2 or 3 years, every day in alphabetical order, until I came to one. And it was a fella called Tom Brady Jr., and he was talking about emotional sobriety. And he said that when he was 26 years sober, he was going into this terrible place of pain and whatever. He just wanted to die. And he came across Bill's letter. And it made him think about where was his dependencies. And listening to him, I realized my dependency was on the woman in my life to give me my sense of self-worth. And if I came in home and she had a long face, she wasn't looking happy, I knew it was something I'd done. And I had to find out what it was, because I'd had to convince her that, well, we've been through that, and that's done. Get over it. Get on with this sort of thing, because I've got to get her back looking happy so that I can sit down and watch the football in peace. Because I'm not going to be okay until she's okay. So we got to get her okay for me to be okay. And that was a fruitless quest. And I was pushing on these wrong buttons all the time. So I got down on my knees. At this stage now, I've been separated for a long time. And I got down on my knees and I prayed to God to take away my need for her or any woman to make me my sense of self-worth. And I then went up by a lonely place by the river, and I prayed again. And as I was coming back, you know, Bill W., in his letter, which you can find online very easily, it's Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier. But in this letter, Bill had said that he knew that the solution to his pain was in the 11-step prayer. In that part of the prayer where it says, God grant me the strength to comfort rather than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, and to love than to be loved. Now, I've been looking at this and I couldn't quite get it, but at this moment, walking back after the prayer, I suddenly realized, it just hit me. It hit me. This is not a prayer to be a saint. This is a prayer for freedom. If my objective in life, if I can get to the stage where what I'm looking at is not what I'm going to get out of a relationship, but what can I give to a relationship, then the reaction I get back is irrelevant to how I feel. So if I want to feel good, you know, most of the time, then my quest is to give up the need for other people to give validation. I listened to a lot of speaker tapes over a long time around this thing, and I used to cycle 14 kilometers into the next town to do my shopping or whatever, and I'd listen to these speaker tapes over and over and over again. And there was a Rabbi Shaiz, and he also had links to AA, but he talked about this, and he talked about the self-validation issue. And you know, I mean, I would, if anybody wants any of these tapes and whatever, you can contact me. You know, my contact details are quite easy. I'm just Brendan SA, as in ESSAY @gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send them on to you. And in his talk, he's talking about this validation and this dependence that we have. And he said that the only way to self-validation, not needing others to give me that thing, is through God consciousness. And I thought, man, I've been trying on this thing with the third step and getting closer to God and whatever. But God consciousness, I mean, that sounds, how do you get that? I mean, are you talking about years in a sort of, in a monastery, meditating or whatever? and he said something very, 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 very nice. Or well, not nice. It just opened up life to me. He said, God consciousness is when I accept myself as I am, you as you are, and the world as it is today. It doesn't say I don't have to like it. I don't like all that. But I have to accept that is reality. Now, when I accept that is reality, when I accept, as my father used to say to me about my mother when I get upset about what she said to me, he said, Brendan, it's not personal. It's just the way she is. When I stop taking every action as personal, when I stop taking, the way the world is as personal, when I stop believing that I have to make the world, everything has to be perfect for me to be okay, when I can accept this is reality today, I have a higher power, God is okay with the way it is today, for whatever reason. This is the way it is. God is okay with me the way I am today. He's okay with you the way you are. When that happens, life just becomes easy. It just becomes easy because everything that happens, if everything that happens is God's will, then the only thing I need to do to be comfortable in this world the way it is to live by the principles of the program. It tells me in the third step, it says we have a new employer. Being all powerful, he gives us what we need if we stay close to him and do his work well. So if I want to be happy, I need to let go of needing me, you, or the world to change for me to be okay, just for me. So, in conclusion, years ago, I had a fellow who, when I first got into AA, and I was really rattling, and I was in a Latin American country, and I was talking to these people. Nobody who seemed to be working the steps, but there was people, staying sober. And this guy came, and he's 33 years sober, and somehow I got working the steps, and I came back to Ireland, and I went to visit him, and I wanted to do my fifth step, and I was going, oh, yeah. And he told me to sort of, it's okay. He says, calm down, like God's here, he's everywhere, but it'll be okay. But his wife gave me a present as I was leaving, and it was something that she had written out by hand. And this is the way it goes. It was like, we'll pull over just to do this one because I don't want the noise to affect it. It goes like this. As children bring their broken toys with tears for us to mend, I brought my broken dreams to God because he is my friend. But then instead of leaving him in peace to work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. At last I grabbed them back again and said, how could you be so slow? My child, he said, what could I do? You never did let go. Every morning I do a written meditation. I try to remember to do it. Sit down and write just one page of whatever comes into my head without editing. Just write it down. Then go back over it and read it. And I take that as my directions from my higher power. And usually what it says to me is relax, let go, let God, let be. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Brendan. Hey, what was the title of that poem you just recited?
Let go, let God.
Let go, let God was the title of the poem. Awesome. I love it. I'll put this along with other resources that you mentioned in the show notes of the podcast so that others can access those. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. We have some questions that have come in from the audience, and yes, there has been some distracting noises from the driving, but the message is solid. Thank you so much for that. We'll go to the first question that came in from Sam K. Sam K says, this was very helpful. Thank you. I do that with my wife all the time, not being okay until she's okay. So I sometimes bend over backwards to make her feel better, and if she doesn't, it can make me bitter and resentful. If I understand you correctly, acceptance of myself and her is exactly what I need to attain. What which I can only find through God and working the steps. Is that correct? What's your experience on that, Brendan?
Well, I don't want to get caught out like sort of be politically incorrect or people sort of listening, whatever. But you know, from my experience in relationships, the way it has worked out in my life is I haven't got my relationship back. I've tried, whatever, I've tried to get it back, but sometimes it seems to be coming back and then it goes away again. And I don't know if it's a proper analogy, but the one I have, and you know, I say it to my sponsees, you know, if they're in relationships or whatever, I'd say, you know, like, you've got to be like the shore. You've got to be like the shore. The sea is going to come in and go out. You know, it's just going to come in and go out. One moment it's going to be great, and then the next day, you know, you may not know why, but it doesn't seem to be like sort of, you know, what went wrong. You know, I don't know. My obligation in life is if I want to be happy, I need unity with other people. They may not seek unity with me, but that's not my challenge. My challenge is, am I acting, as Bill said, in a loving way in all situations? And Bill said that he realized that the only way he could fully rely on having, you know, all of God's love was for him to act with the same level of unconditional love towards others. And that's what he was called to do. So, you know, what do? It's a slow process. I don't have to, when I don't have to change somebody else for me to feel okay, then I can allow other people to be as they are. My daughter and her friend, I remember they were traveling with me. They were visiting in Ireland, and they were young. They were about 7 years of age, whatever, the two of them. And I went into the room where they were, and they as soon as I walked in, they looked extremely bored. They looked like just two people who were sitting there thinking, "What the hell is this? What kind of a holiday is this? You know, this really is hopeless." And I said to them, "Well, look, you know, do you want to go to the beach? No. Do you want to go downtown? No. Do you want an ice cream? No. Do you want this? No." And I said, "Okay, let me see if I can get this straight. The fact that you look bored does not necessarily mean that you're bored. Is that right?" And they said, "Yep." And I said, "So in that case, like, I don't have to change. I don't have to change them. They don't need me to make things better. They're okay. They're absolutely okay. As soon as I leave the room, man, they're fine." They're having a great time. And I mean, I've been in a situation where I've come home and my partner's there, and, you know, she's not looking too happy. And I'm thinking, oh, this is something I did. And it was sort of this thing, but I thought we were over it. And I started to push and push and push to find out what's going on. And the next thing is she's in tears and she's on this. And it turns out it's got nothing to do with me at all. It's got to do with the piece of work that she's taken on. And she's feeling really afraid that she's not going to be able to do it. Now I've reduced her to sort of tears, pushing. The male thing, I've got to find out what's going on because I've got to fix it. I got to fix it so that I can be okay, because I'm not able to hang out because I'm feeling guilty all the time because I think that her mood is always dependent on me. When I came back, I'd been abroad for many, many years. And I came back to Ireland and I had this image that I had ruined my parents' life. You know, I'd been an out of control son. So I had destroyed their lives. You know what I mean? Their lives were destroyed by me. I came back, they were having a great time. They were really happy together. It was like a dance. You were watching them. You know, they were married for 60 years. And they had this most incredible relationship and lots of love. They'd had tough times. They'd had this sort of things. but they weren't dependent upon me for every part of their things. My children, I'm not responsible for anybody else's happiness. I'm not. I'm only responsible for my actions. So if my children are bored, well, you know, like they may be bored. I mean, I'm responsible. It's in life. I say this about God as well. I give people options and I give God options. You know, I went back to university and I did some more studies and God gave me a job in that area for 4 years. And then that closed off and I can't get a job in that area again. But I gave him options. So now he's changed. He wants me to do something else. Okay, I'll give him options, you know. And the same with my kids. You know, I give them options. But I'm not responsible to make sure that they're happy every minute of the day. That's not my responsibility. And when I think it's my responsibility, I actually end up interfering with their lives.
Love it. Thank you for going and expounding on some of that. That opened my eyes to a lot of new things. We have another question that came in from Mike N from our live audience. He says, how do you balance between letting go and contributing to taking action? The poem you read was great, and sometimes I find myself helping God. So do I give it to God and walk away? Is that how I balance letting go and continuing to take action?
In the simplest sense, I always say, as I said, I give God options, you know, every month, you know, not religiously, but more or less, I buy a lotto ticket. I usually wait till it's over 120 million, you know, and I do it just in case God needs it to get a lot of money to me quickly. I don't think he's going to need to get a small amount to me because I can't think of anything that I could do wonderful, God, with a small amount of money. So I give him a chance to give me a lot of money. Now, he hasn't used that opportunity yet, but I don't think I should deprive him of the opportunity. That would be me presuming this is what's going to happen. I'm constantly talking to people who are in programs, and the worst thing that I see is people who are not following their dream, that are in jobs that they hate doing, that are struggling along there, that think that somehow or other this is imposed upon them. I mean, as far as I understand it, God wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. He doesn't demand that I be rich. He doesn't require me to earn a lot of money to be happy, joyous, and free. He doesn't require me to work 9 to 5. You know, he's been with me for the last 65 years and he knows it's not going to happen. So he's okay with that. So he doesn't put me in jobs that require 9 to 5. You know, he's okay with when sometimes I don't really, I'm not really working all that hard and I haven't done this sort of thing. And, I haven't put in all the hours of this. But God gives me the ability to do really interesting things and really successful things in short periods of time. And he's made my brain in a way that it works. I've got attention deficit disorder, they call it, but it actually means that I can see the big picture very easily. But I can get distracted by the small things. So my place is better off up in the big picture. Get other people to do the other things. And understanding that allows me to be the rabbi that I was talking about. He talks about a rebbe, like, very senior rabbi who's dying. And this guy's like a saint, and he's on the point of dying and he's crying. And, and all his acolytes around him sort of say, "Oh, Rabbi, why are you crying?" And he says, "Because I'm afraid of judgment." And they said, "How could you be afraid of judgment? You're like a saint." And he said, "You think that I'm afraid that when I get to to this thing, they're going to say, 'Zusha, why weren't you more like Moses?'" He says, "I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid that when I get there, they're going to say, 'Zusha, why weren't you more like Zusha?'" And I've started to realize I wasn't sent to be here to be Juan or Frederick or Roy Kay. I was sent here to be Brendan. And my job is to try, through letting go, to let God help me grow into the Brendan that he had in mind. And that means for me to take away, I've got to let go of any kind of judgment of self. You know, I mean, sure, I go through all this inventory and I identify defects. I ask God to take them away. If he doesn't take them all away, man, you know, he's okay with the fact I talk too much. All right. You know, I said, like, you know, and what that does is, if I'm not comparing myself to other people, then I don't have to compete with other people. Yeah, I can just be me. I can just be me. And this is, you know, this is a really, really important thing. You know, being able to just be me and be happy with that. Yeah, that's a real let God one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. And that's so hard. Just being okay with being me and trying to be the best me, or the me that God wants me to be, whether it's the best me or whatever, but whatever the me God wants me to be. Another question here. Is there another angle at, or another going deeper into how you can, about speaking more about not seeking or needing validation from others? That question comes from Marco. Can you please speak more about not seeking or needing validation from others?
Okay, there is actually a WhatsApp group, and I'm just going to try to see if I can pull it up here so I can make sure I give you the right name. And I think they actually just changed the name, so let me just see if I can find it here now. And it's focusing in particularly on this whole thing of yeah, okay. There's I'll keep looking. So it focuses in on this whole issue of emotional sobriety, and it brings up a lot of people. Like this podcast, it's not fixed to any particular recovery group. And again, if people contact me and they want to be put up onto that list, I'm happy to do so. Let me see if I can find it here.
And while you're looking, I'll make sure that your email is in the show notes of the podcast, so people can contact you.
That'd be great. Yeah. Because it's just not coming up for me. You know the way these things, they never come up when you need them. But there's a fellow called Dr. Alan Berger, and I worked off Alan Berger's work, and he did a lot of work on this whole thing of emotional sobriety and Bill's letter, and he goes into it and he analyzes it from he compares it to the writings of top psychologists and all that sort of stuff and whatever. And I've looked at a lot of that, and I looked at his thing, but and he has an inventory which he developed for that, and it's quite interesting. You know, I mean, he looks at what's the unhealthy dependency. You know, what happened? What's the unhealthy dependency related to it? What's the demand? And then how does it affect me? And then, what's the other thing? What do I have to believe to be able to get out of this? And I took a look at it and I worked around it. It worked for me to a certain extent, but I couldn't really get my teeth into it. And then I came across something by a fellow called Mark V, who's a member of a particular fellowship. And Mark has done this work on shame, and he's come up with this shame inventory. And I combined the two. I took some from the shame inventory, I took some from Dr. Berger's, and I put them together. And from the shame inventory, I brought in this lovely prayer that they have at the end of it, like sort of asking God to take it away. Because, all of this is not, if I'm dealing with this as if it's a psycho, and it is, there's psychological aspects of it, but if I'm handing my will and my life over to God, then I've got to include my mind and what he's going to do and how he's going to work on that. And so it's very good for me to pray to God to relieve me from these unhealthy dependencies and the related demands. And so I've done some workshops on inventory of that and on the shame inventory. And some of those speaker tapes are available around. But if there was a time that you wanted to do this as a group of talks around the emotional sobriety and a series on emotional sobriety and working through an inventory, I'd be very happy to do that because, I think it's really important.
Definitely. I'll definitely reach out to you and schedule something for sometime early next year or so to make that happen. I would love to do that. And I heard you speak once on that shame inventory, and it's very powerful. I'd love to have you come back and talk on that. Thank you so much. Before we close up here, Brendan, do you have any final parting words of wisdom that you'd like to impart with us?
Always look on the bright side of life, you know? And I really mean this seriously. I mean this seriously. We're going to be as happy as we are open to being. Tom Brady talks about the fact that the opposite side of the pride is self-hatred. And that what we end up doing, it's like Narcissus frowning at himself in the pool, saying, oh, you're so ugly, you're so terrible, you're so bad. When I'm beating myself up all the time about what a bad person I am, I'm actually pretty useless to God and to my fellows, because it's another sense of self, and it's totally absorbing, and it's even more pernicious than pride, because when I'm doing that with the self-hatred, I'm saying God might forgive me, but I don't. So I'm playing God. And in the third step, it tells us that the way that we get the freedom from self, it says, it's at the bottom of page 62, it says, this is the how and the why of it. First of all, we have to playing God. It didn't work. We got to put God in the director's role. We go in the action. So we got to stop beating up on ourselves. Yeah, we've got to do the inventories. Yes, we've got to do what we can to make things right. But then we've got to get out of this sort of constant, oh, me, and get on with okay, if God's okay with me, the fastest and the most secure way to getting sober and staying sober long term is working with others. And I can't do that and spend my whole time beating up on myself.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Brendan. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. Please consider joining our private Facebook group. The link is in the chat and in the show notes of the meeting to participate in our community, asking questions and answering others' questions that may come up. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please go do so now. It is a great way to work your 12th step and sharing the message with others. I invite the audience to come back next week when we will be hearing from Judy G, in recovery since 1986, and her topic is one that intrigues me greatly. It will be using is an option for a change. And I really look forward to hearing how she addresses this. I hope to see y'all back here next week. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the 11th step prayer that Brendan will lead us in.
Yeah, thanks. Hang on, I was trying to download this sort of thing. Okay, yeah, this is, if you like to just follow me, I don't know, maybe if people stay muted and just, follow me yourselves, it might work. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I might bring love. That where there is wrong, I might bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there's discontent, I might bring harmony. That where there is error, I might bring truth. That where there is doubt, I might bring faith. That where there's despair, I might bring hope. Where there's dark shadows, that I might bring light. Where there is sorrow, I might bring joy. God grant that I might seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, and to love than to be loved. Because it is through self-forgetting that one finds. It's through forgiving that one is forgiven. It's through dying that one is brought to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. Keep coming back. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of